Hey, welcome to SpaceX Daily, episode 47. It's July 28th, 2026, and I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Here's what's happening at SpaceX today. Heat shield performance on the ship upper stage during Flight 13 now clears a key thermal margin for repeated orbital re-entries. The ship upper stage completed re-entry with its heat shield tiles remaining attached and functional through peak heating. Post-flight imagery shows the tile array survived without major loss and the stage performed a controlled soft splashdown in the Indian Ocean. This outcome directly informs tile attachment and material choices for future vehicles. Elon Musk disclosed that Flight 13 also included an unannounced test on a specific section of the ship alongside the primary objectives. The mission carried the first on-orbit test of a Starlink V3 payload aimed at higher bandwidth and power. Remember, we covered Starship developments yesterday. Today's intact performance moves that forward by lowering the risk of tile loss on the next flight. With the thermal protection question now showing measurable progress, regulators are simultaneously reviewing the flight paths needed to fly more often. The FAA is evaluating an updated Starship trajectory and designated ocean emergency zones for upcoming flights from Starbase. The review covers both ascent corridors and contingency landing areas to support higher flight rates. Updated paths would affect overflight restrictions and public safety calculations. The agency has not set a timeline for a final decision. While Starship works through regulatory steps on the ground, a direct commercial competitor is moving in orbit. Amazon filed a new application with the FCC for 5,105 satellites to expand its Kuiper constellation. The request targets direct-to-cell service to challenge Starlink mobile coverage. The filing follows earlier Kuiper authorizations and focuses on spectrum and orbital slots. No launch schedule was included in the submission. On the launch side, routine Falcon activity continues while Starship development dominates headlines. 2 Falcon 9 missions are slated from Vandenberg Space Force Base this week. Both target polar orbits and will use previously flown boosters. Ground operations are already underway at the pad. The schedule depends on final range and weather approvals. One of the missions will deploy additional Starlink satellites. Beyond traditional satellite deployments, new on-orbit infrastructure is beginning to require its own support services. Orbs has contracted the first inspection escort for a commercial orbital data center. The mission will demonstrate close proximity servicing and monitoring around an active ODC platform. No operator name or orbital parameters were disclosed. The contract marks an early step toward routine on-orbit infrastructure support. That same class of orbital infrastructure is drawing early environmental scrutiny. Worth keeping an eye on, scientists have warned that proposed SpaceX and Blue Origin orbital data centers could increase Earth's climate burden through manufacturing emissions and end-of-life disposal. The analysis compares projected launch cadence and satellite mass to existing industrial sources. No quantitative mitigation plan from either company has been released. Resolution would require either reduced launch mass or verified on-orbit servicing that extends hardware life. Meanwhile, the software layer riding on SpaceX-enabled infrastructure continues to expand. Opsera has extended its Forge platform into the Cursor marketplace to add enterprise governance and context controls for AI-assisted coding workflows. Liatrio was named one of Cursor's first official transformation partners, focusing on enterprise-scale AI coding adoption. SpaceX's satellite and launch capabilities are described as creating a controlling position in future AI infrastructure beyond terrestrial clouds. On the AI front, observers in Phoenix are preparing for a visible Falcon 9 launch later this week, with timing dependent on the final Vandenberg window and clear evening skies expected. In Louisiana, State Senator Bob Henskins discussed potential economic effects of a proposed SpaceX facility in Vermilion Parish during a public forum, where residents raised questions about job creation and infrastructure strain. Community members in Memphis continue to track how the city plans to allocate $3.3 million in XAI-related tax revenue, with proposals including public works and education programs. From an engineering standpoint, the ship upper stage on Flight 13 demonstrated that its current tile array can survive peak reentry heating while preserving attachment integrity all the way to a soft ocean landing. The heat shield problem reduces to balancing three constraints: incident heat flux, material ablation or thermal conductivity, and the mechanical loads transmitted through the attachment points during both ascent vibration and atmospheric deceleration. The successful outcome shows the tile-to-structure interface now carries margin against both thermal expansion mismatch and shear from the plasma flow. That margin directly lowers the risk of tile loss on the next flight, which would otherwise require either thicker tiles or a redesign of the attachment geometry. If the same interface survives a second reentry without refurbishment, the effective cost per use of the thermal protection system drops toward the raw material and forming cost of the tiles themselves, rather than the full installed assembly price. The next data point to watch is whether the recovered ship shows any localized tile degradation that would force a change in material formulation or attachment spacing before the first attempted booster catch. Following the Flight 13 data released yesterday, the intact heat shield performance moves the program one step closer to answering whether the ship can achieve multiple orbital reentries with minimal ground intervention. The plasma environment during reentry imposes heat fluxes that can exceed several megawatts per square meter for tens of seconds. The tiles must reject or absorb that energy while the underlying structure stays below its temperature limit. Attachment points must also resist the dynamic pressure and vibration that peak during the hypersonic phase. The current design appears to have closed the gap between the theoretical minimum mass of ceramic material needed for insulation and the added mass required for mechanical retention and gap fillers. Closing that gap further would reduce the idiot index of the thermal protection system, the ratio of finished installed cost to the raw material cost of the tiles, bringing it nearer to the economics of simple formed ceramics rather than precision aerospace assemblies. Engineers will next examine whether the same tile layout can tolerate the higher entry velocities planned for future missions that carry heavier payloads or target different orbital inclinations. If the recovered hardware confirms uniform tile survival, the program gains a clearer path to testing the ship on a second flight without tile replacement. That step would validate the manufacturing repeatability of the attachment method at scale and reduce the turnaround time between flights. Any localized wear patterns observed on the Indian Ocean recovery would instead point to specific adjustments in tile thickness, coating, or spacing before the design is frozen for higher cadence operations. The data also informs parallel work on the Super Heavy booster, whose own thermal protection needs differ because of its lower velocity at stage separation. Together, these results narrow the remaining unknowns around full vehicle reuse before the first tower catch attempt on a subsequent flight. And a quick market note, SPCX is at $107.38, down 4.3%. Before we go, the next data point to watch is whether the recovered ship from Flight 13 shows any localized tile degradation ahead of the first attempted booster catch. And that's a wrap on today's SpaceX developments. SPCX is trading at $107.38, down 4.3%. Share this with a fellow spaceflight fan if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. Quick tip from the network. Try modern investing techniques next. Modern strategies for Canadian and US investors. Every NARA Network show is free at naranetwork.com. Want the written briefing with source links? Each show keeps a summaries page on naranetwork.com. Scannable, dated, and free. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.